With all the president's race baiting this week and attacks on four women in Congress, a lot of people wondering why one of the most prominent women in the White House has gone silent. Ivanka Trump, where is she? There were reports that the first daughter and senior advisor advocated, along with First Lady Melania Trump, for her dad to repudiate his crowd "Send Her Back" chant. Today, the president says there's no truth to that.
What did the First Lady and Ivanka advise you about the chant? I know you guys talked about it.
False information. It was fake news.
You never talked about it with
Nope.
them?
I talk about it, but they didn't advise me. They told me.
I'm sorry, what
but
did
I
they
didn't.
say?
It's
What did
fake.
they tell you?
By the way, what you're saying, fake news.
What did they tell you about it?
Okay, so they talked about it. They didn't advise him. CNN political analyst Lena Plott just wrote a whole article about Ivanka Trump and, we'll talk about it in The Atlantic. It's a fascinating article. I urge you to read it. So, Lena, the president says Ivanka didn't advise him about Wednesday night's chant. Even if she did, certainly doesn't seem to have had much effect. And I feel like I made a joke about this the other night before all this. It seems like every time there's something controversial that happens, there's a leak that Ivanka Trump, was whispering in the president's ear her concern, which, I don't know if it all comes from Ivanka Trump or her people, but it certainly seems like it does.
Right. And there are two things I think that we can intuit from that pattern. I also joke, too, about the source close to Ivanka, who just magically appears after any controversial moment takes place. But the one thing is that why will she not say these things in public if she truly does believe that her father has done something racist or reprehensible? As the source close to Ivanka will imply, especially in this case, why not go on the record and say that? The second thing would be that the influence that she would telegraph that she had along the campaign trail as a way to kind of ease moderates' minds in voting for him, she clearly doesn't really seem to have that.
Right. I mean, she has enough influence that she can, go to the G20 and try to
right.
shoehorn herself into a conversation with world leaders or show up in the DMZ. But when the rubber hits the road and there's something, repulsive or unattractive that the president is doing or racist, she's nowhere to be seen. Michael Barbaro of the New York Times, he tweeted this today, quote, "For the Xth time, Ivanka Trump spoke with her father about X controversy he touched off, telling him X was problematic. According to X, people close to her who claim that despite mountains of evidence, this conversation mattered." I mean, it happens over and over again, this narrative.
Right. And I think why it was important for me to report out this piece in particular is because, like you said, it did come on the heels of the G20 summit. It did come on the heels of her kind of elbowing her way into the demilitarized zone of all places, the most fraught, tense, important negotiating spot probably on this entire globe. And you have to wonder, if she is willing to step out when there's a historic photo op to be had, but not when the very moral fabric of our nation is called into question, as it was this week, who is she really in the White House for? Is it for herself, something to tell her grandkids about one day? Or is it to actually, steer the direction of this country in a positive manner? Well,
the idea that, she portrays herself as somebody fighting for women's empowerment, and maybe she is doing stuff. But her father has spent the week trying his hardest to disempower four prominent congresswomen, of color. And, the irony that she is the champion of women with this president and the way, he has spoken about women and, some of the allegations against him, it's ironic if it wasn't actually important.
Real, yes, like an actual thing taking place within the bounds of the leader of the free world. And another point to that, too, is, comical but also scary is that anytime something like this happens, the bounds of her portfolio get suddenly narrower and narrower. So women's empowerment was sort of the umbrella that she came in with. And when something like this happens, when the president is, disempowering women, as you point out, suddenly it's, no, this is about women's economic empowerment in the Ivory Coast. So the four congresswomen in America don't necessarily fall into that boundary.
Right, and I think you quoted in your article that on some show she was confronted about something regarding women's empowerment. She said, well, I'm not the president of women's empowerment or something, words to that effect.
Right, she said, I'm not the president of all women's issues. But that's the thing. I mean, it's this lovely oblique phrase that you can throw out anytime you're questioned about something that you find uncomfortable.
Yeah. Lena Plott, again, it's an article in The Atlantic. I urge people to read it. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Andrew.